My husband brought divorce papers to my father's funeral. Made me sign them at the reception. Said your dad would want you to do the right thing. My family watched in horror. I signed. He left with his girlfriend. 2 days later he discovered what else I'd signed that day. At the lawyer's office. Before the funeral. I was standing next to my father's casket when my husband handed me divorce papers. Not at home. Not in private. Right there in the church reception hall, surrounded by people who'd come to pay their respects. The florals from the service were still fresh. Dad had been dead less than 6 hours. My hands were shaking from signing the guest book, from accepting condolences, from trying to hold myself together. Before we continue, thank you for being here. If you believe in protecting yourself from financial abuse and building real security, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us reach more women who need this. Now let's see what happened next. Brian walked up with a man in an expensive suit. Jessica, this is my attorney, Derek Phillips. We need you to sign something. I stared at the manila folder in Brian's hands. At his face, composed, almost gentle. At the people around us, Dad's friends and coworkers, starting to notice something was wrong. Now. My voice came out broken. Your dad would want you to do the right thing, Brian said, loud enough for others to hear. Be honest about our marriage. Sign these and we can both move on. The room went silent. My aunt gasped. My father's best friend took a step forward, then stopped. Everyone was watching. Everyone was waiting to see what I'd do. I looked down at the papers Brian was offering. Divorce petition. My name as respondent. His name as petitioner. All the legal language about irreconcilable differences and asset division. You're doing this here? At my father's funeral. I'm doing this now because it needs to be done, he said. Before things get complicated with the estate. Your dad would understand. He'd want you to be practical. Something about the way he said it, the fake sympathy, the manipulation, the timing, made me think about the meeting I'd had that morning. The one Brian didn't know about. The one at the lawyer's office 2 hours before Dad's service. The one where I'd learned everything. Okay, I whispered. I'll sign. But what Brian didn't know was what else I'd signed that day. What I'd learned. What trap my father had set in his final 72 hours of life. He didn't know that the papers I'd signed that morning had already destroyed him. Let me back up. Let me tell you how I got here. How my father ended up dead at 72. How my husband ended up serving me divorce papers over his casket. How my entire life unraveled and rebuilt itself in the span of 1 week. It started 3 days earlier, on a Monday morning that felt exactly like every other Monday morning for the past 7 years. I stood at the kitchen counter at 5:30 a.m., making coffee in the same chipped pot I'd been using since Brian and I got married. The machine gurgled and dripped, filling our small rental house with a smell that should have been comforting but just felt repetitive. Another day. Another early shift. Another morning of waking up before my husband because I had a real job and he had networking meetings. Brian was still asleep upstairs. He'd been sleeping later and later over the past year, claiming his investor calls ran late into the night. I'd stopped questioning it months ago because questions led to arguments, and arguments led to me feeling like I was crazy for not understanding his vision. I worked at Memorial Hospital as a medical billing specialist. Fancy title for sitting in a basement cubicle processing insurance claims for people I'd never meet. The job paid okay, enough to cover our rent, groceries, utilities, and whatever Brian's latest business venture required. He always had a venture. Always had a pitch. Always had a reason why this one would be different from all the others that had failed. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Dad. Breakfast Thursday? Need to talk to you about something. Important. I frowned at the screen. Dad usually texted about breakfast on Saturdays, our standing weekly tradition. Thursday was different. And important wasn't a word Dad used lightly. I typed back, everything okay? 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally, we'll explain Thursday. 7 a.m. at Pete's. Love you, kiddo. Something about that message made my stomach tighten. Dad was 72, still working as an electrician, still climbing ladders and fixing wiring in buildings across 3 states. I worried about him constantly, especially since Mom had died when I was 16. He was all I had left. Him and Brian, and lately Brian felt more like a stranger than a husband. Brian stumbled downstairs at 6:15, hair messy, wearing the clothes he'd fallen asleep in on the couch last night. Another late networking meeting, he'd said when he came home at midnight. Another opportunity that required his full attention. He kissed my forehead without really looking at me. Morning. Morning. Coffee's ready. Can't. Running late. He grabbed his keys, checked his phone, headed for the door. Late for what? It's 6:15 in the morning. Breakfast meeting with a potential investor. This one's different, Jess. This one's real. I'd heard that exact sentence at least 50 times in 7 years. Brian, we need to talk about some bills. Later. Promise. This meeting could change everything. The door closed behind him. I stood alone in our kitchen holding my coffee, staring at the stack of red-stamped envelopes on the counter I'd been avoiding for weeks. Past due. Final notice. Collections warning. I noticed something then. The cologne. Brian was wearing the expensive cologne he kept in the bathroom cabinet, the one he said was too special for every day. He was wearing it for a 6:30 a.m. breakfast meeting. That detail stuck with me all day. Through my commute to the hospital. Through 8 hours of processing claims in my windowless cubicle between Sharon, who talked constantly about her grandkids, and Lisa, who complained about her deadbeat ex-husband. Through lunch in my car, eating a sandwich I'd packed because we couldn't afford the cafeteria. Around 3 p.m., I opened my personal email to check something for a claim I was processing. That's when I saw it. Subject line: Your Capital Reserve Platinum Card Statement. I'd never heard of Capital Reserve Platinum Card. Never applied for it. Never used it. My hands went cold as I clicked through. Account opened 6 months ago. Current balance: $8,400. Recent charges scrolled down the screen. Restaurants in neighborhoods I'd never been to, a jewelry store, weekend hotel stays. Charges that painted a picture I didn't want to see. All in my name. All using my social security number. Sharon's voice came over the cubicle wall. You okay, honey? You look pale. I closed the laptop, forced my face into something resembling normal. Just tired. You work too hard. You should take a day off. I couldn't afford a day off. Not with Brian's ventures draining our accounts and bills piling up, and now this credit card fraud in my name. During my break, I called the credit card company from my car in the employee parking lot. The representative was professional, unhelpful in that way customer service always was. The account was opened in person at our downtown branch 6 months ago. The application includes your signature and correct security question answers. What security questions? Mother's maiden name, city where you were born, name of your first pet. Brian knew all of those answers. Brian knew everything about me. We'd been married 7 years. I trusted him with every detail of my life. I didn't open this account. I need to dispute the charges. You'll need to file a police report for identity theft first, ma'am. Then we can begin an investigation. I sat in my Honda Civic staring at the hospital building, at people walking in and out living their normal lives, and felt something crack inside my chest. Not a clean break. A fracture that had been forming for months, maybe years, finally splitting open. My phone rang. That, "Hey kiddo, about Thursday. Can we move it up? Tomorrow morning instead? Same time, same place." His voice sounded strange. Tight. Urgent. "Dad, what's going on? You're scaring me." "Nothing to be scared about. Just need to talk to you about some paperwork. Estate stuff. Boring but important." "Are you sick?" "No." "Well, no more than usual. Just getting old and trying to be responsible." Thursday at 7 a.m. Pete's Breakfast Corner. Don't tell Brian. That last part stopped me. Why not? Just don't. Please. Trust me on this. He hung up before I could ask more questions. I drove home in a fog, my brain trying to connect dots I didn't want to see. The credit card fraud. Brian's late nights. The cologne this morning. Dad's urgent breakfast request and his warning not to tell Brian. When I walked into our rental house that evening, Brian was on the couch with his laptop, phone pressed to his ear. He hung up immediately when he saw me. "Just an investor," he said quickly. "Getting close on the tech startup thing." I set down my purse, looked at our living room. Second-hand furniture we'd bought when we first got married. Walls we couldn't paint because we were renting. Nothing permanent. Nothing that felt like home. I'd wanted to buy a house years ago, used Dad's advice about building equity, But Brian always had reasons to wait. Brian, I need to ask you something. Can it wait? I've got another call in 5 minutes. No. It can't wait. My voice came out harder than I'd intended. Do you know anything about a Capital Reserve credit card in my name? His face changed. Just for a second. A flash of something, guilt, calculation, fear, before he rearranged it into confusion. What? Well, why would I? Because someone opened an account with my information. My social security number, my mother's maiden name, everything. And there's $8,400 in charges I didn't make. He stood up, ran his hand through his hair. That's identity theft. We need to file a police report. The card was opened in person. With security questions only you or I would know the answers to. Jess, are you accusing me of something? I'm asking you a direct question. He moved closer, put his hands on my shoulders. The touch felt manipulative rather than comforting. You've been so stressed lately. Working those long hours, worrying about money. Is it possible you opened it and forgot? Maybe during one of those nights you couldn't sleep. The word appeared in my mind with perfect clarity. Gaslighting. I stepped back away from his hands. I didn't open it, Brian. Hey. Okay. He held up his hands like I was being unreasonable. I believe you. We'll figure it out. But right now I really do have this call I can't miss. It's with the Silicon Valley guy, the one who could actually fund the whole thing. Can we talk about this tonight? He grabbed his keys, his phone, his laptop. I'll be at the coffee shop. Better Wi-Fi for video calls. The door closed behind him. I stood alone in our rented house, surrounded by temporary furniture and unpaid bills and the growing certainty that my husband was lying to me about everything. I didn't sleep that night. Just lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Brian come home at 11:30 p.m., listening to him undress in the dark, listening to him fall asleep while I counted all the small lies that had led to this moment. Thursday morning, I met Dad at Pete's Breakfast Corner at 7 a.m. The diner was a place we'd been going since I was a kid. Red vinyl booths, coffee in white ceramic mugs, waitresses who'd worked there for decades and knew everyone's orders by heart. Dad was already there, sitting in our usual booth by the window. He looked different. Smaller somehow. Older than he'd looked the week before. You look tired, Dad. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Could say the same about you, kiddo. We ordered. Him the lumberjack special. Me the eggs and toast I never finished. The waitress left and Dad pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. I need you to go somewhere this morning. Before work. He slid the envelope across the table. Inside was a business card. Eleanor Hartwell, estate attorney. Dad, what's going on? His jaw tightened. The same expression he'd had when Mom was sick, when he was trying to be strong for me. I'm updating some paperwork. The will, the properties, all that stuff. Eleanor's been my attorney for years. She needs you to sign some things. What properties? He waved his hand dismissively. Some rental houses I picked up over the years. Union benefits, retirement stuff. Nothing exciting. But it's important you're there. 9 a.m. Her office is downtown, 10 minutes from the hospital. Can't this wait until the weekend? No. The word came out sharp. Then he softened. Please, Jess. I need you there this morning. It's important. Something in his voice made me agree. We finished breakfast mostly in silence. He paid like always and walked me to my car in the parking lot. He hugged me longer than usual. Tighter. Whatever happens, kiddo, remember, I've always got your back. Always have, always will. Dad, you're really scaring me now. Don't be scared. Just be smart. And remember, I love you. He got in his truck and drove away. I sat in my car staring at the business card, wondering why my father's hug had felt like goodbye. Eleanor Hartwell's office was in a brick building downtown, the kind with brass nameplates and wood-paneled elevators. The receptionist led me to a conference room with dark furniture and walls lined with law books. Eleanor was maybe 55, sharp eyes, graying hair pulled back in a bun. She closed the door and sat across from me. Your father called me Monday evening, she said without preamble. He said it was urgent. Life or death urgent. Those were his exact words. My stomach dropped. Is Dad sick? Not in the way you're thinking. She opened a file folder thick with documents. Jessica, what I'm about to tell you is going to be overwhelming. But I need you to listen carefully because we don't have much time. She spread papers across the table. Property deeds. Bank statements. Trust documents. Your father owns 12 rental properties across 3 cities. He's been acquiring them for 40 years, starting when your mother was still alive. Current appraised value, approximately $4.2 million. Monthly rental income after expenses, around $18,000. Total estate value including life insurance and other assets, just over $5 million. The room tilted. That's impossible. Dad's an electrician. Your father is an electrician who invested every extra dollar he ever made into real estate. He kept it quiet. Lived modestly. Let everyone think he was just scraping by. He did it to protect what he'd built. She pulled out another document, this one newer, the paper still crisp. Monday afternoon your father came to this office extremely agitated. He showed me a text message on his phone. A photo of your husband with another woman. The message came from an unknown number. Your father said, and I quote, "That son of a bitch married my daughter for money she doesn't even know exists." The words hit me but didn't quite land. Brian was cheating. Dad had proof. Dad had known before I did. Your father spent Monday, Tuesday, and yesterday in this office, restructuring his entire estate. He created an irrevocable trust with you as sole beneficiary. Everything, all 12 properties, all rental income, life insurance, pension, savings, transferred into a trust that specifically excludes spousal claims under any circumstances. She pushed the documents toward me. As of yesterday at 3 p.m., you became the sole owner of your father's entire estate. The trust structure means even though you're married, Brian has no legal claim to any of it. It's protected from divorce settlements, bankruptcy, creditor claims, lawsuits. Everything. I don't understand. Why the rush? Why this week? Eleanor's expression softened. Because your father knew what was coming. He said Brian would try to serve you divorce papers soon, probably at a moment when you'd be vulnerable and emotional. He said, men like Brian always strike when they think they have the advantage. Your father wanted you protected before that happened. She handed me the final document, a sealed envelope with my name in Dad's handwriting. He made me promise to give you this after explaining the trust. He also recorded video testimony yesterday, documenting his mental capacity and his reasons for the trust structure. He was very thorough, Jessica. Whatever challenges come, this will hold up. My hands shook as I took the envelope. When did he finalize everything? Yesterday. Wednesday at 3 p.m. He signed the last papers, recorded his testimony, paid my retainer from his business account. He seemed. She paused. Relieved. Like he'd been carrying a tremendous weight and finally set it down. He shook my hand, thanked me for 40 years of legal service and said something strange, "Now I can rest." My phone rang. Brian. I stared at his name on the screen, unable to move. Eleanor reached across the table. Jessica, I received a call at 6 a.m. this morning from a Detective Morrison with the county sheriff's office. Your father had a massive heart attack last night in his sleep. The paramedics couldn't revive him. I'm so sorry. The conference room disappeared. Sound became muffled. My father was dead. Dad was gone. And in his final 72 hours he'd somehow known it was coming, known what Brian was planning, known exactly what needed to be done to protect me. That's how I ended up here. Standing next to my father's casket in a church reception hall. Watching my husband hand me divorce papers with Dad's friends looking on in horror. Preparing to sign documents that Brian thought would give him half of an estate he didn't know I already owned. Preparing to spring the trap my father had built in his last 3 days of life. Derek Phillips followed us to a small Sunday school classroom upstairs, away from the reception. Children's drawings covered the walls. Noah's Ark, Jesus with lambs, bright crayons on construction paper. Tiny chairs were stacked in the corner. The room smelled like old books and glue sticks. He closed the door, opened his leather folder with practiced efficiency. Mrs. Morrison, I represent your husband in a personal legal matter. Given the timing of your father's passing and the need for clarity regarding estate proceedings, Mr. Morrison has asked me to present you with these documents today. He pulled out papers, set them on a child-sized table. Divorce petition. State of Oregon. Petitioner, Brian James Morrison. Respondent, Jessica Marie Morrison. My aunt's face appeared in the small window of the classroom door. She looked horrified, mouthing words I couldn't hear. Other faces joined hers. Dad's coworkers, neighbors, people who'd come to honor my father and were now witnessing this. You want me to sign divorce papers right now? While my father's body is downstairs. Brian's voice went soft, manipulative. Jess, I know the timing is terrible. But your dad would want you to be honest. About us. About our marriage. We've been unhappy for years. You know that. I stared at him. At this man who'd slept beside me for 7 years. Who I'd supported through every failed venture. Who'd kissed my forehead this morning before the funeral and told me he'd be there for me through everything. The easy way or the hard way, Derek interjected. Easy. You sign today, we file uncontested, divide assets equally, nobody fights. Clean and simple. Hard way. Contested divorce, years of litigation, your father's estate frozen during proceedings. Expensive and painful for everyone involved. Brian stepped closer, lowered his voice like we were the only people in the room. I don't want to hurt you more than you're already hurting. Sign these, we both walk away, we both start over. Your dad was practical. He'd understand. The faces in the window multiplied. I could see Maria from Dad's duplex. Curtis from the Morrison Street building. People Dad had helped for decades, watching his daughter get ambushed at his funeral. I thought about that morning. About Eleanor's office. About the documents I'd signed at 7 a.m., 2 hours before the service started. About the empire I'd learned existed while Dad's body was still at the morgue. Okay, I whispered. Where do I sign? Relief flooded Brian's face. Derek pulled out a pen, showed me the signature lines. Initial here. Sign there. Date this page. My hand shook. Real tears now, because my father was really dead and this marriage was really over, and I was signing papers in a Sunday school classroom while people watched through the window like this was some kind of horrible theater. I signed Jessica Morrison 4 times. Derek witnessed each one, dated them, collected everything back into his folder. I'll file these Monday morning. You'll receive confirmation within the week. Brian actually hugged me. Put his arms around me like he cared, like the past 7 years had meant something. Thank you for being reasonable. This is the right thing. You'll see. They left. I stood alone with crayon drawings of Bible stories, listening to footsteps descend the stairs, listening to my aunt's voice raised in anger downstairs, listening to my marriage end in the same building where my father's funeral had just happened. I waited 30 seconds. Then I went back down to the reception. Brian was already at a table with 2 of his friends, checking his phone, relaxed like he'd just finished an unpleasant but necessary task. He caught my eye, gave me a small nod. Almost sympathetic. I walked to the corner where Eleanor stood near the coffee station. She'd arrived during the funeral service, sat in the back, didn't approach me until now. It's done, I said quietly. She nodded once. Good. Now we wait. I moved through the rest of the reception like a ghost. Accepting condolences. Listening to stories about Dad I'd never heard. A woman named Maria from the 7th Avenue duplex hugged me, cried with me, told me my father had waived her rent for 3 months when she'd lost her job. Curtis, an elderly man from Morrison Street, said Dad had fixed his grandson's car for free last winter. Story after story of a man who'd lived quietly, generously without ever telling me. The Johnson family approached, young parents with a toddler. Your dad installed playground equipment behind our building with his own hands, the mother said. Wouldn't let us pay him. Said kids needed safe places to play. These people knew my father better than I'd known him. They'd seen the empire he'd built, not in properties and rental income, but in relationships and kindness and care. Brian left early, barely an hour after the signing. Kissed my forehead again, said something about needing to handle some things, promised he'd check on me later. He didn't check on me later. He didn't come home that night. I stayed until the last person left. Helped Pastor Williams and the church ladies clean up. Stacked chairs. Threw away paper plates. Put leftover casseroles in containers. Physical work that didn't require thinking. Your father was a good man, Pastor Williams said as we wiped down tables. Best kind. The kind who did right without needing credit for it. I drove to a Holiday Inn Express instead of going home. Paid cash. Used my mother's maiden name to check in. Eleanor had suggested it that morning during our first meeting before the funeral. You don't want to be accessible this weekend. Let Brian think everything's going according to his plan. Let him get comfortable. I lay on the hotel bed, still in my funeral dress, and finally opened my phone to the dozens of missed calls and messages. 7 from Brian, increasingly annoyed. Where are you? Jess, I need to talk about the property list for probate. Why aren't you answering? We need to stay ahead of this. Then a text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Vanessa. Brian's with me. We need to discuss asset division. Please call tomorrow. Vanessa. The blonde woman from the photo Eleanor had shown me. The one kissing my husband 2 weeks ago. My phone rang. Eleanor. How are you holding up? I signed the papers. Just like Dad planned. Good. Monday morning, Brian's attorney will file the divorce petition. By Monday afternoon he'll try to access information about your father's estate. That's when he'll discover the trust structure. By Tuesday he'll realize he has no claim to anything. Wednesday at the latest we'll be filing counter-complaints for identity theft and fraud based on those credit cards. Her voice was steady, professional, almost soothing. Jessica, your father built a perfect trap. Every move Brian makes from here tightens it. You just need to stay strong a little longer. I don't feel strong. I feel empty. That's grief. That's normal. But underneath the grief there's something else building. Soon you'll feel it. Freedom. Clarity. Strength you didn't know you had. After we hung up, I pulled out Dad's letter again. Read it for the 5th time since that morning. I'm giving you freedom. Freedom from a man who never deserved you. The postscript caught my attention. The commercial property on 4th Street? That's the one I leased to Brian 3 years ago below market rate, trying to give him a chance. Check with the property management company. I opened my laptop, searched my email for anything about 4th Street. Found an old message from 3 years ago, Dad forwarding me Brian's business plan for an electrical supply store. I'd been so proud of Brian then. Dad was giving him a real opportunity, helping him finally succeed. I pulled up the property management company's website, Riverside Properties. Found their office number. It was Saturday evening, but I called anyway, left a voicemail asking about the 4th Street commercial space and my father's account. They called back 20 minutes later. Weekend emergency line. Ms. Hart? I'm so sorry for your loss. Your father was one of our best clients. Regarding the 4th Street property, are you aware of the ongoing lease violation issues? What issues? The property manager, a woman named Sandra, sighed. Your father leased that space to Brian Morrison 3 years ago at $1,200 monthly when market rate was $2,800. Very generous terms. The lease specified use as an electrical supply retail store. About 18 months ago, we discovered Mr. Morrison had sublet the space to a vape shop without authorization. He was collecting roughly $3,000 monthly from the subtenant while paying your father $1,200 and pocketing the difference. My stomach turned. Your father tried to work with him. Multiple warnings. Payment plans. Second chances. But Mr. Morrison fell 3 months behind on rent, violated the sublease clause repeatedly, and ignored all communication. 6 months ago, your father authorized us to begin eviction proceedings and filed a civil suit for back rent and damages. Total amount owed, $47,000. I sat on the hotel bed, phone pressed to my ear, understanding spreading through me like poison. Has Brian been served with the lawsuit? Not yet. The papers were supposed to be delivered this week, but given your father's passing we held them out of respect. We weren't sure how you wanted to proceed. Proceed exactly as my father instructed. Serve the papers. Continue the eviction. All of it. Are you sure? It's a family matter now. Brian Morrison is not my family. Not anymore. My father made his decision. I'm standing by it. After hanging up, I sat in that generic hotel room with its beige walls and mass-produced art, and felt something shift inside me. Not grief anymore. Not shock. Something colder. Harder. Brian hadn't just cheated on me. He'd stolen from my father. Lied about his business failing when actually he'd been committing fraud. Used Dad's generosity as another revenue stream while crying poverty at home. Dad had known. For 6 months, Dad had known and said nothing to me. Building his case. Documenting everything. Protecting me the only way he knew how. I texted Eleanor, the 4th Street property. Dad leased it to Brian. He's been defrauding Dad for 18 months. There's a lawsuit pending. Can we use this? Her response came immediately. Yes. That's fraud, breach of contract, and evidence of character. Adds weight to everything else. Your father was meticulous, Jessica. Every piece matters. Sunday morning I woke early in that hotel room. Couldn't go home. Couldn't face the house I'd shared with Brian. Instead, I drove to the first property on Eleanor's list. The duplex on 7th Avenue where Maria lived. The building was small but well-maintained. 2 units, flower boxes on the windows, a neat lawn someone clearly cared for. Dad's old truck was still parked in the small lot behind it, work tools visible through the rear window. I sat in my car staring at that truck. The faded Union sticker on the bumper. The toolbox he'd had since before I was born. He'd driven this truck for 18 years. Never replaced it because it still worked. That was Dad. If it works, why change it? Maria came out at 7 a.m., saw me, waved. I got out, met her on the porch. Couldn't sleep, I explained. She nodded understanding. Come in. Coffee's on. Her duplex was small but loved. Plants everywhere. Photos of grandchildren. A life built in a space my father had provided. I've been here 19 years, Maria said, pouring coffee into mugs with cats on them. Since my divorce. Your father gave me this place when I had 2 kids, no job and nowhere to go. First month free. Security deposit waived. He said, pay when you can. Family takes care of family. She showed me a folder she'd kept. Every rent receipt for 19 years, never late, always including a handwritten thank you note. He fixed our heater himself during that ice storm 3 years back. Middle of the night. Wouldn't hire it out. Said he didn't trust contractors to do it right. He was up on my roof at 2 a.m., 70 years old, making sure my grandkids wouldn't freeze. I spent Sunday morning driving to each property. Meeting tenants. Hearing stories. The Johnsons at the Cedar Street house showed me the playground equipment Dad had installed. Curtis at Morrison Street walked me through the community garden Dad had started in the empty lot behind the building. Every property told the same story. A man who cared more about people than profit. Who kept rents affordable. Who fixed things himself. Who showed up when families needed help. By noon I'd seen all 12 properties. Understood what Dad had really built. Not just buildings. Not just wealth. Community. Trust. Relationships that would outlast him. I sat in my car outside the mixed-use building downtown. The one with the empty apartment on the 2nd floor that Eleanor said was mine if I wanted it, and felt my phone buzz. Brian. Frantic. Where the hell are you? I've been calling all day. What do you need, Brian? I got a copy of your dad's will from county records. Did you know he owned 12 buildings? I knew he had some properties. Some? Jessica, we're talking millions. And according to this, it's all in your name. But we're married, which means it's marital property. We split it. That's how this works. I let the silence stretch. Is that why you served me divorce papers yesterday? At my father's funeral? So you could claim half of what he built. That's not, Jess, you're upset. Come home. Let's talk about this calmly. I'm not coming home. Consider those papers I signed my agreement. We're done. You can't just, we need to settle the assets. The estate goes through probate. I have rights. What rights, Brian? He hung up. Minutes later Vanessa called. Jessica, this is Vanessa Chin. I'm a real estate professional and a friend of Brian's. He's asked me to help facilitate asset division discussions. I think we should meet with attorneys to ensure everything's handled fairly. Her voice was smooth, practiced like she'd done this before. These properties need management. Brian has expressed interest in taking over several units as part of his settlement share. Brian has no settlement share. But thank you for calling. I hung up. Sat in my car. Watched people walk past on the downtown sidewalk, living their normal Sunday lives, having no idea that my entire world had exploded and rebuilt itself in 72 hours. My father had died knowing what Brian was. Had spent his last days protecting me from it. Had built a trap so perfect that Brian was already walking into it without knowing. And I was going to watch every single step. Monday morning I sat in Eleanor's office again. The space felt different now, less like a place where bad news got delivered and more like a war room. She'd been working all weekend. Files covered the conference table, organized by property, by date, by type of documentation. Coffee? She offered, pouring from a carafe without waiting for my answer. I took the mug, grateful for something to hold. I hadn't slept in the hotel Sunday night. Just lay there replaying Brian's voice on the phone, the way he'd gone straight to the money, the way Vanessa had called like she had any right to speak to me. We're starting with the commercial property on 4th Street, Eleanor said, pulling out the thickest folder. The one your father leased to Brian. I'd almost forgotten about Dad's postscript. Almost. Eleanor opened her laptop, angled it so I could see the screen. Email exchanges between Dad and Riverside Properties, the management company. The messages started 3 years ago, friendly and optimistic. Jason Hart leasing 2,400 square feet to son-in-law Brian Morrison for electrical supply store. Below market rate approved. $1,200 per month when market rate is $2,800. Lease term, 3 years with option to renew. Dad had believed in Brian once. Had given him a real opportunity, not just talked about it. Had cut the rent by more than half to give him a fighting chance. I scrolled through more emails. The tone shifted around 18 months ago. Jason, need to discuss 4th Street property. Tenant has sublet space to retail vape shop without authorization per lease agreement. Lease specifies electrical supply store only. Please advise. Dad's response, I'll talk to Brian. He probably needed extra income to get through the startup phase. I'll have him correct it. More emails. More promises from Brian that Eleanor showed me in forwarded messages. Getting the vape shop out this month, I swear. Just need another few weeks to transition. The electrical supply business is picking up, won't need the sublease much longer. Wise. All wise. 6 months ago the property manager's tone changed completely. Jason, we need to discuss lease termination. Tenant is 3 months behind on rent. Sublease continues despite multiple violations. Neighboring businesses complaining about increased foot traffic and loitering. The vape shop is causing problems we can't ignore. Your call on how to proceed, but this situation isn't sustainable. Dad's response was dated 3 days before he changed his will. Proceed with eviction. File necessary paperwork. I made a mistake trusting this man. Document everything for legal purposes. Eleanor closed the laptop. Your father discovered Brian was collecting roughly $3,000 monthly from the vape shop subtenant. He paid your father $1,200, pocketed the $1,800 difference, and told both of you the business was struggling. My hands tightened around the coffee mug. For how long? 18 months. Total amount Brian owes your father in back rent, unpaid utilities, property damages and lease violations. $47,000. Your father filed a civil suit 2 weeks ago. Brian hasn't been served yet. The papers were scheduled for delivery this week, but the process server held them after your father died, waiting for instruction from the estate. I set down the mug before I crushed it. Brian cried to me about that business for 3 years. Said Dad wasn't helping enough, wasn't giving him good advice, didn't understand modern retail. And the whole time he was stealing from him. Not just stealing. Lying to you about it. Using your sympathy to deflect questions. Your father knew you'd defend Brian if confronted. That's why he built the case quietly. Eleanor pulled out another document. There's more. I've been trying to trace that text message your father received. The photo of Brian and the woman. This morning I found the source. She showed me a website on her phone. Marcus Chin, private investigator. Licensed in Oregon, Washington, and California. Specializing in matrimonial investigations, surveillance and background checks. The number belongs to him. I called. He wants to meet with you. Today if you're ready. A private investigator sent my father that photo? Yes. And I think you need to hear why. 2 hours later I sat in a cramped office above a Chinese restaurant in a part of downtown I'd never been to. The building smelled like ginger and soy sauce. The stairway was narrow, walls covered in peeling paint. Marcus Chen's office was on the 3rd floor, a single room with a desk, filing cabinets, and windows that looked out onto a parking lot. Marcus was maybe 40, Asian with tired eyes and the kind of face that had seen too much of people's worst moments. Evidence folders were stacked on every available surface. Filing cabinets, shelves, the floor. He gestured to the only other chair in the room. Sit. Want tea? No. I want to know why you sent my father that photo. He nodded, appreciating the directness. Your father didn't hire me. I contacted him. Let me show you why. He pulled a file from his desk, thick enough to be a phone book. The tab read, Vanessa Chin. That's my ex-wife. Was my wife. Divorce finalized 2 months ago after a year of hell. He opened the file. Surveillance photos spilled out. A blonde woman, polished and professional, meeting various men at restaurants, hotels, parking garages. Some photos were dated, time-stamped, annotated with locations. Vanessa's a real estate agent. Successful. Makes good money. She's also a serial cheater and, I discovered too late, a con artist. I started tracking her last year when I realized our marriage was falling apart and I didn't understand why. He pulled out a specific set of photos. Vanessa with Brian. Meeting at a coffee shop. At a restaurant. Outside a hotel. The progression was obvious. Strangers to acquaintances to something more. I followed her to a property showing 18 months ago. One of those open houses for a commercial space downtown. Your husband was there pretending to be a potential buyer. They talked for an hour. I watched the chemistry develop. Marcus's voice was flat, professionally detached, but I heard the pain underneath. I documented their affair for 6 months. Watched it develop from flirtation to regular meetings to hotel rooms. Standard cheating, I thought. Until I found files on her laptop. He turned his computer screen toward me. Spreadsheets. Property records. Public documents showing Dad's real estate holdings. Vanessa researches her targets. She knew exactly who Brian was married to. She pulled county property records, found your father's holdings, calculated their approximate value. She cultivated Brian deliberately. Not because she loved him. Because she wanted access to your inheritance. My throat went dry. She knew about Dad's properties before Brian did? Real estate agents have access to public records most people don't know how to search. She found every property your father owned, traced the acquisition history, estimated current values. She knew you were sitting on millions and didn't know it. She saw Brian as her way in. I thought about Vanessa's phone call Sunday. How smooth she'd sounded. How professional. How she'd positioned herself as a neutral third party trying to help. Why tell my father? Why not me? Marcus leaned back in his chair. Bez, I saw you once. Last summer. You were picking Brian up from a restaurant where he was meeting Vanessa. Both of them lied, told you and me they were meeting other people. You looked exhausted. Confused. Like you were trying to hold something together that was already broken. You looked exactly how I felt. He pulled out more files. I thought about warning you directly. Showing up, explaining everything. But I've been a PI for 15 years. I've learned that affair victims don't believe strangers. They make excuses. They defend their partners. They need proof from someone they trust. So you sent the photo to Dad. I sent it to your father because parents see clearly when spouses are blind. I hoped he'd talk to you, show you the truth, help you leave before Vanessa and Brian could execute their plan. What plan? Marcus pulled up audio files on his laptop. This is where it gets worse. I installed a recording device in Vanessa's car during our separation. Oregon's a one-party consent state, and since it was marital property, it was legal. She didn't know. He pressed play. Vanessa's voice came through the laptop speakers, confident and cold. He thinks his father-in-law has 2 rental houses. Maybe 3. Try 12 properties worth millions. I pulled the public records. The old man's been buying real estate for 40 years. Smart. Quiet. Built a fortune nobody knows about. Brian's voice, recognizable and nauseating. Jessica said her dad was just an electrician. Union guy, blue collar, nothing special. Electricians in the union make decent money, especially one who worked major construction projects across 3 states. But this guy's smart. Kept everything quiet. Lived below his means. Classic stealth wealth. When he dies, Jessica inherits everything. You're married to a millionaire who doesn't know she's a millionaire. So we just wait for the old man to die? No. We're not waiting for some 70-year-old's timeline. Here's what we do. The plan unfolded in recorded detail. Vanessa instructing Brian to open credit cards in my name, build up debt, create a narrative of financial irresponsibility. Brian expressing concern about the risk. Vanessa pushing harder. Financial abuse is hard to prove. By the time she figures out the credit cards exist, you'll have already filed for divorce claiming she's the problem. Irresponsible with money. Won't listen to reason. Judges eat that up. You'll get half of everything including the inheritance. Another recording, dated 3 weeks ago. My lawyer says inheritances received during marriage are marital property in Oregon. If we're still married when he dies, you get half automatically. Vanessa's voice again. Then we need to accelerate the timeline. Make the old man die sooner. My blood went cold. Brian's nervous laugh. We're not killing anyone. That's insane. Not murder, genius. Stress. I researched him. Jason Hart has a heart condition. It's in his union medical records, which are semi-public if you know where to look. Men in their 70s with heart conditions don't last long under stress. Make his life harder. Create problems. Family drama. Financial pressure on his daughter. Stress kills old men every day. It's not murder. It's just helping nature along. Marcus stopped the playback. I sat frozen, unable to process what I'd heard. There's more, he said quietly. Conversations about forging your signature on property deeds after your father died. Plans to transfer assets before you understood what you owned. Even discussions about framing you for tax fraud if you resisted the divorce settlement. Vanessa's done this before. She targeted a widower 2 years ago, almost succeeded in taking his dead wife's life insurance before his adult children intervened. I found my voice barely. Why are you helping me? Because I failed to protect myself. I lost $80,000 to Vanessa before I figured out what she was. But I can protect you. And because 3 days before your father died, Jason came to this office. We spent 2 hours going through everything. He was angry but calm. Focused. He said, make sure my daughter knows the truth. All of it. Don't let her make excuses for him. Marcus pulled out another folder, this one with Dad's handwriting on notes paper-clipped inside. Your father predicted everything. He said Brian would use your grief as a weapon. Would serve you divorce papers at the funeral to maximize your emotional vulnerability. Would count on you being too shocked, too polite, too devastated to fight back in public. He showed me documents. Divorce papers pre-filed in my name, dated 3 days before Dad died. Papers that were never submitted. Your father had these prepared as a backup. He was ready to file on your behalf if necessary. But he suspected Brian would move first. He wanted you protected either way. The plan Dad had built was intricate, almost cinematic. He'd anticipated Brian's funeral ambush. Had coached Eleanor on timing, on what to reveal when, on how to let Brian's arrogance lead him into the trap. The trust documents transferred everything to your name Wednesday at 3 p.m., Marcus continued. Legally, as of that moment, you became the sole owner of $5 million in assets. The trust structure means even though you're married, Brian has zero claim. It's protected from divorce, bankruptcy, lawsuits, creditors, everything. He pulled out surveillance photos from the past week. Brian meeting with his attorney Derek Phillips. Brian with Vanessa at a coffee shop reviewing documents. Brian at a print shop, making copies of what were obviously legal papers. He served you at the funeral exactly as your father predicted. Vanessa coached him. She called it poetic justice in one of the recordings. They thought you'd sign anything while grieving. Thought your family would be too horrified to intervene in a public setting. Marcus met my eyes. Your father set a perfect trap. Brian walked right into it. The question now is what happens next. What does happen next? Monday, today, Brian's attorney files the divorce petition. By this afternoon he'll try to access information about your father's estate for asset division. That's when he discovers the trust. By tomorrow he'll realize he has no claim to anything. By Wednesday we'll be filing criminal complaints for identity theft and fraud. And by the end of the week Brian and Vanessa will both be facing charges. I looked at the folders, the recordings, the evidence of 18 months of conspiracy against me. My father did all this in 3 days? No. Your father had been documenting Brian's failures for years. Little things. Financial red flags. Behavioral patterns. The commercial property fraud. He just didn't put the pieces together until I sent that photo Monday. Then everything clicked into place. He spent 72 hours building the legal framework to protect you from what he knew was coming. I sat back in that cramped office above the Chinese restaurant, surrounded by evidence of my husband's betrayal, and felt something shift inside me. Dad had known he was dying. I was sure of it now. The urgency, the thoroughness, the way he'd said goodbye at breakfast Thursday morning without saying the words. He'd tied up every loose end in 72 hours because he'd known he didn't have more time. And he'd spent those final hours protecting me. I left Marcus's office Friday afternoon with a flash drive containing every recording, every surveillance photo, every piece of evidence he'd compiled over 18 months. The weight of it in my pocket felt heavier than it should have. "Tomorrow's going to be hard," Marcus said at the door. "Harder than you think. You'll see Brian playing the grieving son-in-law. You'll watch him perform sympathy he doesn't feel. Just remember, your father knew this was coming. He prepared you for it." Saturday morning arrived too fast. I woke at 5 a.m. in the hotel room, put on the black dress I'd bought Thursday afternoon in a fog, and drove to St. Mark's Church an hour before the service started. The building smelled like lilies and furniture polish, exactly like it had 16 years ago when we'd buried Mom in this same sanctuary. I'd requested the same church deliberately. Dad would have wanted it. Some kind of full circle. I stood alone in front of Dad's closed casket, the reality of it finally hitting me. He was in there. My father. The man who'd raised me alone after Mom died. Who'd worked overtime for years to pay for my college. Who'd built an empire in silence to protect me from men like Brian. Gone. The funeral director, Mr. Patterson, had asked Thursday if I wanted a viewing. "Some families find it brings closure," he'd said gently. I'd said no immediately. I wanted to remember Dad in his work clothes with electrical tape on his belt. Smiling over breakfast at Pete's. Alive and solid and real. Not whatever was in that casket. People started arriving around 8:30. Electricians from Local 48, Dad's union, wearing their pins-on dark suits. Men with weathered hands and respectful faces who'd worked alongside him for decades. They approached me one by one, shaking my hand, sharing brief stories. "Your dad saved my life on a job in '98, one man said. "Saw a wiring problem nobody else caught. I'd be dead if he hadn't." Neighbors from Dad's street came next. The woman who lived 2 doors down, the family across the street, the teenager who mowed Dad's lawn every summer. Then people I didn't recognize at all. A small woman approached me, maybe 60, with kind eyes and rough hands. "You're Jessica. Your father talked about you constantly. Showed me pictures. I'm Maria. I rent the duplex on 7th Avenue. Been there 19 years come October." He hugged me like family. "Your daddy saved my life when I had nothing. I was divorced, 2 kids, no job. He gave me that apartment, first month free, said, 'Pay when you can.' He was family to me. More than family." An elderly black man introduced himself next. "Curtis, from the Morrison Street building." His voice was deep and warm. "Your father fixed my granddaughter's car last winter. Wouldn't take a dime. Said he couldn't stand seeing her take the bus in the cold." That's who Jason was. The Johnsons came over. A young couple, maybe 30 years old, with a toddler. "We rent the house on Cedar Street," the husband said. "Your dad installed a whole playground set in the backyard for Emma here. Did it himself over a weekend. Wouldn't hear of us paying. Said kids need safe places to play." Story after story. Tenant after tenant. People whose lives Dad had touched in ways he'd never mentioned to me. "Your father wasn't just a landlord," Maria said, squeezing my hand again. "He was community. He was family. He made us feel like we mattered." The church filled steadily. By 9:45, there were maybe 200 people in the pews. I'd expected 50, maybe 75. Instead, the sanctuary was packed with lives my father had impacted. Brian arrived at 9:50, 10 minutes before the service started. He wore a suit I'd never seen before. Charcoal gray, expensive fabric, tailored fit. We couldn't afford that suit. Not on my salary. Not with the debts he'd racked up. But I knew where he'd gotten it now. Vanessa had probably picked it out. Probably paid for it with money she'd conned from someone else. He slid into the front pew beside me, didn't hold my hand, didn't ask how I was doing. His leg bounced with nervous energy. His phone was in his hand, screen lighting up every few seconds with text he tried to hide. "You okay?" he whispered as the organ started playing. I nodded because speaking felt impossible. He hadn't asked about the will. Hadn't asked about my feelings. Hadn't asked what he could do to help. He'd just shown up, playing the role of supportive husband for an audience that didn't know our marriage had been dead for years. Pastor Williams delivered the eulogy. He'd known Dad since I was a kid, had presided over Mom's funeral, had watched our family shrink from 3 to 2. Jason Hart was a man who believed in building things that lasted, Pastor Williams said, his voice carrying to every corner of the sanctuary. Not just buildings, though he built those too. But community. Trust. Relationships. He believed in taking care of people not because it benefited him but because it was right. He told stories I'd never heard. About Dad quietly paying for a church member's medical bills. About Dad showing up to help rebuild a neighbor's fence after a storm. About Dad mentoring young electricians who struggled with the technical aspects of the trade. Jason worked until the day he died because work gave him purpose. But his real purpose was his daughter. Everything he did, every choice he made, was to ensure Jessica would be taken care of. That's a father's love in its purest form. I felt Brian shift beside me, checking his phone again under the cover of the hymnal. The service ended. We filed out to the church basement for the reception. Exactly the kind of gathering Dad would have wanted. No fancy catering. No expensive arrangements. Just folding tables covered in casseroles and sandwich trays brought by church members. Coffee in big industrial percolators. Paper plates and plastic forks. Simple. Practical. I stood near a memory board I'd put together Friday evening. Photos of Dad through the years. Dad and Mom on their wedding day. Dad holding baby me in the hospital. Dad at my high school graduation. Dad in his work truck, smiling, covered in sawdust from some project. The line of people wanting to express condolences seemed endless. Marcus showed up around noon, standing at the back of the basement near the coffee station. We'd agreed he'd attend, be a witness, be ready for whatever Brian tried. He caught my eye once, nodded. A silent message. I'm here. Brian brought me a plate of food I couldn't imagine eating. You should sit down. You look exhausted. I was exhausted. Grief exhaustion mixed with anticipation mixed with rage that sat in my chest like hot coal. I'm okay. We should talk about next steps soon. The estate stuff. I've been thinking about how to handle the probate filing. Jessica Morrison? A man I didn't recognize approached. Late 40s, expensive suit, leather folder tucked under his arm. Professional haircut. Confident posture. Yes. I'm Derek Phillips, attorney. I'm so sorry for your loss. He glanced at Brian, some unspoken communication passing between them. Could I speak with you both privately? It will only take a moment. My stomach dropped. This was it. The moment Dad had predicted. The moment Marcus had warned me about. Brian's face showed just the slightest hint of satisfaction before he arranged it into concern. Of course. There's an empty classroom upstairs we can use. I followed them up the narrow stairs, past the sanctuary to the Sunday school wing. Brian opened the door to a small room. Children's drawings covering the walls, Bible verses in crayon, tiny chairs stacked in the corner. Derek closed the door. Set his folder on a child-sized table covered in dried glue and marker stains. Mrs. Morrison, I represent your husband in a personal legal matter. Given the timing of your father's passing and the need for clarity regarding estate proceedings, Mr. Morrison has asked me to present you with these documents today. He opened the folder. Pulled out papers. Divorce petition. State of Oregon. Case number assigned. Petitioner, Brian James Morrison. Respondent, Jessica Marie Morrison. Through the small window in the classroom door, I could see faces gathering. My aunt. Maria from the duplex. Curtis from Morrison Street. People drawn by the unusual sight of us disappearing with an attorney. You're serving me with divorce papers? My voice came out broken, which wasn't hard to fake. Today? At my father's funeral. Derek shifted uncomfortably. I advised against the timing, Mrs. Morrison. However, my client insisted that given the inheritance situation and your father's estate likely entering probate, clarity on marital assets was time-sensitive. Brian stepped forward, his voice dropping into that gentle, manipulative tone I'd learned to hate. Jess, I know this is horrible timing. I know how it looks. But your dad would want you to do the right thing. He'd want you to be honest about our marriage. We've been unhappy for years. You know that. I stared at him. At this man I'd shared a bed with for 7 years. Who I'd supported through every failed venture. Who I'd defended when Dad expressed doubts. We can do this the easy way or the hard way, Brian continued. Easy way. You sign today, acknowledge receipt, we file uncontested, split everything 50-50. Your dad's properties go through probate, get divided, nobody fights. Quick, clean, done. We both move on with our lives. And the hard way? Derek answered, his tone professionally neutral. Contested divorce. Years of litigation. Legal fees mounting on both sides. Your father's estate frozen during proceedings, costing money in attorney fees and court costs. Painful for everyone involved. Brian moved closer, put his hand on my shoulder. Through the door window, I saw my aunt's face go pale with shock. I don't want to make this harder than it already is, Brian said. I don't want to hurt you more than you're already hurting. Sign the papers now. Grieve your dad without this hanging over you. Deal with the legal details later when you're thinking more clearly. I promise I'll make this as painless as possible. The eagerness in his voice was barely hidden under the fake compassion. He thought he was winning. Thought he'd timed this perfectly. Thought I'd sign anything while grief-stricken and surrounded by witnesses who'd pressure me not to make a scene. I thought about Dad's letter. About Marcus's recordings. About Vanessa's voice on that audio file saying, "Make the old man die sooner." "Okay," I whispered. "Where do I sign?" Brian's relief was visible. His shoulders relaxed. A small smile touched his lips before he caught himself. Derek laid the papers out on the tiny table, showed me signature lines. Initial here, here, and here. Sign at the bottom. Date this page. My hand shook as I picked up the pen. Real tears now, because my father really was dead and this marriage really was over, and I was standing in a Sunday school classroom signing divorce papers while children's drawings of Noah's Ark looked down at me. I signed Jessica Morrison 4 times. Derek witnessed each signature, added his own name, dated everything with careful precision. "I'll file these Monday morning first thing," he said, collecting papers back into his folder. "You'll receive official confirmation within 7 to 10 business days. If you have questions, your attorney can contact my office." Brian actually hugged me, pulled me against his chest like he cared. Like the past 7 years had meant something. Like he was sad this was ending. "Thank you for being reasonable," he said into my hair. "This is the right thing. We'll both be happier this way." They left the room. I stood alone with crayon drawings of Bible stories and the smell of old glue, counting to 30 in my head. Then I returned to the reception. Brian was already at a table with 2 of his friends, his body language relaxed, phone out, typing away. Probably texting Vanessa. Probably celebrating. I walked to Marcus, who'd watched everything from his position by the coffee. "It's done," I said quietly. He nodded. Phase 1 complete. Now we wait. Eleanor had arrived during the service, sitting in the back. She caught my eye from across the room. A small nod. He understood. The trap was set. The prey had walked right in. Now we waited for him to realize the jaws were closing. I returned to accepting condolences, playing my role. The grieving daughter. The soon-to-be divorced wife. The woman who'd just signed papers at her father's funeral because she was too emotionally destroyed to fight. Maria hugged me tight. "Your father loved you so much, honey. Whatever you're going through, you're not alone. We're here. All of us. Jason's family takes care of each other." Curtis nodded, his voice firm. "Your daddy took care of us for decades. Now we take care of his daughter. That's how this works. That's what family means." I cried again, real tears, because these strangers, these tenants I'd just met, were offering more genuine support than my husband had in years. Brian left the reception at 2 p.m., barely 90 minutes after serving me divorce papers. He kissed my forehead like we were still married, like nothing had changed. "I've got some things to handle. Take your time here. I'll check on you later." He didn't check on me later. He didn't come home that night. He disappeared into whatever life he was building with Vanessa, thinking he'd just secured his claim to millions. I stayed until the last person left. Helped the church ladies clean up. Stacked chairs. Collected casserole dishes to return to their owners. Swept floors. Physical work that didn't require thinking. Pastor Williams walked me to my car as the sun set, the sky turning orange and purple over the church parking lot. "Your father was proud of you," he said. "Whatever storm you're facing, remember that. He was so proud of the woman you became." I drove to the Holiday Inn Express instead of home. Paid cash. Checked in under my mother's maiden name, Sarah Mitchell. The clerk didn't ask questions. The room was generic. Beige walls. Floral bedspread. Painting of a lighthouse. Television remote wrapped in plastic. I lay on the bed, still in my funeral dress, and finally checked my phone. 7 missed calls from Brian. 3 voicemails, his tone shifting from concerned to irritated to angry. Jess, where are you? Call me back. I need to talk to you about the property list for probate. Where are you? Why aren't you answering? We need to get ahead of this before things get complicated. Call me. Then at 9 p.m. a text from an unknown number. This is Vanessa. Brian's with me. We need to discuss asset division. Please call tomorrow so we can handle this professionally. My phone rang. Eleanor. How are you holding up? I signed. Just like Dad planned. Good. Monday morning, Derek Phillips files the divorce petition with the county. By Monday afternoon he'll start discovery process, requesting estate information. That's when he contacts me as the estate attorney. That's when Brian discovers the trust. Her voice was steady, almost soothing. By Tuesday Brian realizes he has no claim to anything. By Wednesday we're filing countercomplaints for identity theft and fraud. Marcus submits his evidence to the district attorney Monday morning. The recordings, the surveillance, the conspiracy documentation. All of it. She paused. Jessica, your father built a perfect trap. Every move Brian makes from here tightens it. I closed my eyes. I don't feel victorious. I feel empty. That's grief. That's normal. That's human. But underneath the grief there's something building. Soon you'll feel it. Clarity. Strength. Freedom. After we hung up I opened Dad's letter one more time, reading it in the harsh fluorescent light of the hotel room. Life big. Life happy. Live free. Tomorrow was Sunday. Monday the trap would spring. But tonight I was just a daughter who'd lost her father. Who'd signed away a marriage that had died years ago. Who was hiding in a hotel room because going home felt impossible. I set my alarm for 6 a.m. There was somewhere I needed to be before everything exploded. Sunday morning I woke at 5:30 a.m. without needing the alarm. The hotel room was dark, silent except for the hum of the air conditioning unit. I dressed in jeans and a sweater, grabbed Dad's old electrician's jacket from my car, the one with Local 48 embroidered on the back that I'd kept meaning to return to him, and drove through empty streets to 7th Avenue. The duplex where Maria lived looked different in the early morning light. Peaceful. Well-maintained flower boxes on the windows, lawn recently mowed, paint fresh even though the building was decades old. Dad's truck sat in the small parking lot behind the building, right where he'd left it Thursday morning before his heart attack. I parked next to it, stared at the faded Union sticker on the bumper, the toolbox visible through the rear window. He'd driven this truck for 18 years, maybe longer. Never replaced it because it still worked fine. If it works, why change it? He'd say whenever I suggested getting something newer, safer. That was Dad. Practical to the point of stubbornness. Maria came out at 7 a.m., probably heading to work. She saw my car, saw me sitting there, and immediately changed direction toward me instead of her own vehicle. Jessica? Honey, what are you doing here? I got out, pulled Dad's jacket tighter against the morning chill. Couldn't sleep. Didn't want to be alone. I hope that's okay. Her face softened with understanding. Come inside. I'll make coffee. Her duplex was small but clearly loved. Plants covered every available surface. Windowsills, shelves, hanging baskets. Photos of grandchildren lined the mantel. A crocheted blanket draped over the couch. A life built in a space my father had provided. I've been here since my divorce, Maria said, filling a kettle at the sink. 22 years old with 2 babies and nowhere to go. My ex took everything in the split. The house, the car, the savings. Left me with nothing but child support he never paid. He pulled out mugs with cats on them. Your father showed me this place on a Tuesday afternoon. I told him I couldn't afford first month, last month, and deposit. He said, how about you just pay when you can? Family takes care of family. I cried right there during the showing. Maria opened a drawer, pulled out a folder. Inside were 19 years of rent receipts, organized by year, each one including a handwritten thank you note. Never missed a payment once I got on my feet, she said. Your daddy wouldn't raise the rent even when the neighborhood got expensive. Said he didn't buy properties to get rich, he bought them to help people build lives. He fixed our heater himself during that ice storm 3 years back. Middle of the night, 70 years old, up on the roof making sure my grandbabies wouldn't freeze. I sipped the coffee, barely tasting it. He never told me any of this. Your daddy wasn't the bragging type. I spent Sunday morning driving to each property on Eleanor's list. Meeting tenants. Hearing stories. seeing what Dad had actually built beyond the dollar amounts and property deeds. Curtis at Morrison Street showed me the community garden Dad had started in the empty lot behind the building. Raised beds full of tomatoes and peppers and herbs. A small greenhouse Dad had constructed from salvaged windows. Lot was just weeds and trash when your father bought this place, Curtis explained, walking me through rows of vegetables. He said, food brings people together. Organized the whole thing. Got everyone involved. Now we grow enough to feed half the building and donate extras to the food bank. The Johnsons at Cedar Street had a toddler who immediately ran to show me the playground equipment in the backyard. Swings, a slide, monkey bars, all installed by Dad himself over a weekend. We offered to pay, Mrs. Johnson said, watching her daughter play. Your father refused. Said every kid deserves a safe place to be a kid. He wouldn't even let us buy the materials. Did it all himself. By noon I'd visited all 12 properties. Each one told the same story. A man who cared more about people than profit. Who kept rents affordable. Who fixed things himself. Who built community. Are we going to lose our homes? Maria had asked before I left her duplex. With your father gone, will someone sell these buildings? No, I told her firmly. Nothing changes. Everything stays exactly as Dad wanted. I didn't tell her I was now their landlord. That I owned these buildings, these addresses, this legacy. They'd find out soon enough. The last stop was 4th Street. The commercial property Dad had leased to Brian. The windows were dark, a for lease sign prominently displayed. The vape shop Brian had sublet to was gone, evicted weeks ago according to the timeline Eleanor had shown me. I sat in my car in that parking lot, staring at the empty storefront. Dad had given Brian this opportunity. Cut the rent by more than half. Believed in him when he'd had no reason to. And Brian had stolen from him. Lied to him. Used his generosity as another revenue stream while crying poverty at home. Whatever sympathy I'd been holding onto snapped in that moment. My phone rang at 2 p.m. Brian, his voice frantic and angry. Where the hell are you? I've been calling all day. At a coffee shop. Why? We need to talk. No. This is important. About what? His voice shifted, forcing calm. About the properties. I pulled your dad's will from county records. Did you know he owned 12 buildings? I knew he had some rental properties. Some? Jessica, we're talking about millions of dollars. And according to the will, it's all in your name. But we're married, which means... Which means what, Brian? Silence stretched. Then, which means it's marital property. We split it 50-50. That's how community property laws work in Oregon. I let the pause lengthen, listening to his breathing on the other end of the line. Is that why you served me divorce papers yesterday? At my father's funeral? So you could claim half of what he built. That's not, Jess, you're upset. You're not thinking clearly. Let's talk about this calmly. Come home so we can discuss this like adults. I'm not coming home. What do you mean you're not coming home? I mean I'm not living with you anymore. The divorce papers you made me sign? Consider them my agreement. We're done, Brian. Completely done. His voice rose, panic creeping in. You can't just... We need to settle the asset division. Your father's estate has to go through probate. I have rights as your spouse. I have legal claims. What rights, Brian? What claims? He hung up abruptly. 5 minutes later my phone rang again. Unknown number. I answered. Jessica, this is Vanessa Chin. I'm a real estate professional and a friend of Brian's. Her voice was smooth, practiced, like she'd done this kind of call 1,000 times. Brian's asked me to help facilitate discussions about property division. I think we should meet, perhaps with attorneys present, to ensure everything is handled fairly and professionally. I almost laughed. Is that right? I understand you're grieving. This is a difficult time. But financial matters can't wait indefinitely. These properties need proper management. Brian has expressed interest in taking over several units as part of his settlement share. Given his background, Brian has no settlement share. He has no claim to my father's estate. But thank you for the offer. I'm sorry, I don't think you understand the legal. I hung up. 30 seconds later Marcus called. They're rattled. Vanessa just called her attorney. I'm still monitoring her phone per the divorce discovery. She's trying to figure out how to claim the properties before you secure them. She used those exact words. She doesn't know about the trust yet. When will they find out? Brian's attorney will file the divorce petition tomorrow morning first thing. Standard procedure includes checking for marital assets, which means contacting the estate attorney of record. Eleanor's name is on every single property deed as the attorney who handled the transactions. Derek Phillips will call her by noon tomorrow. Maybe sooner. And then the trap snaps shut. Monday morning arrived cold and gray. I checked out of the hotel at 8 a.m., drove to Eleanor's office and found it already full of people. Eleanor sat at the head of the conference table. Marcus stood near the window. And a woman I didn't recognize occupied the chair beside Eleanor. 35, sharp eyes, expensive but practical suit. Jessica, this is Amanda Pierce, Eleanor said. She's a prosecutor with the district attorney's white-collar crime division. Marcus submitted his evidence early this morning. She has questions. Amanda shook my hand, her grip firm. Ms. Morrison, I've reviewed the surveillance recordings and financial documents Mr. Chen provided. The evidence suggests your husband and Vanessa Chen conspired to defraud you through identity theft, credit fraud and potential exploitation of inheritance. I need to take your formal statement. I spent 2 hours recounting everything. The credit cards I'd never opened. Brian's lies about business ventures. The sublease fraud at 4th Street. The funeral papers. The conspiracy Marcus had recorded. Amanda took notes on a laptop, asked clarifying questions, occasionally stopped to verify details with Marcus. The identity theft alone is prosecutable, she said finally. Multiple counts given the number of fraudulent accounts. The conspiracy elements make it significantly more serious. If we can prove they discussed accelerating your father's death, even through creating stress, that crosses into territory that could carry major charges. What happens now? We open a formal criminal investigation. Subpoena financial records from the credit card companies. Interview witnesses. Build the case methodically. This takes time, but the evidence Mr. Chen provided is unusually strong. Recorded conversations of the defendants discussing the crime in detail. That's rare. Eleanor's phone rang at 11:30 a.m. She glanced at the caller ID, smiled slightly. Right on schedule. Derek Phillips, Brian's divorce attorney. She put it on speaker. Eleanor Hartwell. Ms. Hartwell, Derek Phillips here. I represent Brian Morrison in a divorce matter involving your client Jessica Morrison. I'm calling regarding asset disclosure. County records show you as attorney of record for several properties owned by Mrs. Morrison's late father, Jason Hart. We need complete documentation for marital asset division purposes. Those properties are not marital assets, Mr. Phillips. With all due respect, Ms. Hartwell, anything inherited during marriage is subject to division under Oregon community property law. Not when held in an irrevocable trust established prior to the decedent's death with specific exclusions for spousal claims, Mr. Phillips. Jason Hart created a comprehensive trust structure transferring all assets to his daughter 3 days before his death. The trust documents explicitly state that under no circumstances can a spouse claim any portion of the corpus, income, appreciation, or associated benefits. I'll email you the relevant sections within the hour. Silence on the line. Long enough that I thought he'd hung up. Then, that's highly unusual timing. It's also entirely legal and ironclad. Your client has no claim to any property, rental income, or associated assets. Furthermore, I should inform you that as of this morning, Ms. Morrison has filed countercomplaints regarding identity theft, fraud, and financial abuse during the marriage. The district attorney's office has opened a criminal investigation. You might want to discuss all of this with your client before proceeding further. The line went dead. Eleanor hung up, looked at me with something close to satisfaction. That's phase 2. Now we wait for the panic. Brian showed up at Eleanor's office at 2 p.m. unannounced, demanding to see me. Building security stopped him in the lobby. Eleanor pulled up the security camera feed on her computer and we all watched. Brian's face was red, his gestures wild. She's my wife. I have a right to speak to her. You can't keep me out. Eleanor stood. I'll handle this. Marcus and I watched on the monitor as she went downstairs, spoke to Brian in the lobby. We couldn't hear the audio, but the body language told the story. Brian pointing, shouting. Eleanor standing perfectly still, perfectly calm. Security guards flanking her, ready to intervene. She came back upstairs 5 minutes later. He accused me of backdating the trust documents. Said he'd prove fraud. I informed him the trust was executed Wednesday, witnessed by 3 people including a notary public, recorded with video testimony, and filed with the county Thursday morning before his father-in-law's death. Public record, fully documented, entirely legal. Marcus rewound the security footage, turned up the audio. We listened to Brian's voice, increasingly desperate. This is because of Vanessa. She told me this would be easy. She said. He'd stopped himself, but not soon enough. He just confirmed conspiracy on camera, Marcus said. That recording goes straight to Amanda. I sat there watching my husband, my soon-to-be ex-husband, unravel on a security monitor and felt absolutely nothing. No satisfaction. No guilt. Just a hollow emptiness where 7 years of marriage used to be. What does he do now? I asked. Eleanor pulled out her calendar, made a few notes. He'll call Vanessa, panic together, probably hire a criminal defense attorney who'll tell them they're in serious trouble. Within 48 hours they'll realize the full scope. The properties they can't touch. The evidence they didn't know existed. The legal walls closing in from multiple directions. And then... Marcus answered, his voice quiet with certainty. Then they turn on each other. It's what people like them always do. Vanessa will blame Brian, claim he misled her about the inheritance value. Brian will blame Vanessa, say she manipulated him into the fraud. They'll both try to cut deals with the prosecutor, throw the other person under the bus to save themselves. Predictable as sunrise. I thought about Dad's letter. About the trap he'd built in 72 hours. About how he'd known exactly how this would unfold. My father was a genius. Eleanor shook her head slightly. Your father was a man who loved his daughter and refused to let her be destroyed. The genius was in the preparation. The love was in the protection. Tuesday morning, Marcus called before I'd even finished my coffee. Can you come to my office? There's more you need to know about Vanessa. A lot more. I arrived an hour later to find his desk even more cluttered than before. Folders stacked everywhere, each one labeled with dates, locations, names I didn't recognize. He gestured for me to sit, then spread the folders out like he was laying out a timeline. I've been investigating Vanessa for 8 months. What I showed you Friday was just the surface. Enough to help your father build his case. But Jessica, your husband wasn't Vanessa's first target. He wasn't even her second or third. Brian was number 4. He opened the first folder. Inside were photos of Marcus himself, younger, smiling, standing next to Vanessa at what looked like a wedding. I married her 6 years ago. Met her at an open house. She was the listing agent. I was looking for investment property. She was charming, successful, attentive. Made me feel like the most important person in the room. We dated for 8 months, got married at City Hall, started what I thought was a real partnership. His voice stayed flat, professional, but I heard the pain underneath. I'm a private investigator. I investigate people for a living. But I never investigated her. That was my mistake. She drained $80,000 from our joint accounts over 18 months. Claimed they were bad investments, market downturns, things beyond her control. By the time I figured out she was lying, the money was gone. The divorce cost me another $100,000. I was her learning curve, the one she practiced on. He opened the second folder. A photo of an older man, maybe 65, kind face, thinning hair. Thomas Bradley. Widower. Vanessa met him 2 years after our divorce. His wife had died of cancer, left him $300,000 in life insurance. He was lonely, vulnerable, grieving. Vanessa dated him for 4 months, played the role of supportive girlfriend, convinced him to invest in a real estate development opportunity she was managing. Exclusive investment, limited partners, guaranteed returns. Marcus pulled out documents, investment agreements, promissory notes, all professionally printed and completely fake. The opportunity didn't exist. She took his $300,000, strung him along for 6 months with fake updates, then disappeared. Thomas lost everything. Had a stress-related heart attack, died alone in his apartment. No criminal charges were ever filed because technically he'd willingly signed investment documents. The fraud was too sophisticated to prove. He opened a third folder. A professional headshot of a man in his 40s, expensive suit, confident smile. David Park. Businessman, married, owned 3 commercial properties in Portland. Vanessa targeted him last year. She initiated an affair, convinced him she was in love, that his wife didn't appreciate him. Classic stuff. But here's where she got clever. She convinced him to put her name on property deeds for estate planning purposes. Told him it would protect the assets if his wife ever filed for divorce. Marcus showed me property records, deed transfers, notarized documents. When his wife found out about the affair and filed for divorce, the discovery process revealed Vanessa legally owned half his commercial properties. She walked away with $1.2 million in the settlement. David's business collapsed. Last I heard, he was working construction to pay off the debts. He opened the 4th folder. Photos of Brian. Surveillance images of him with Vanessa at restaurants, coffee shops, hotels. Then came Brian Morrison. She researched your family before ever approaching him. Real estate agents have access to property records most people don't know how to search. She pulled your father's holdings, traced acquisition dates, estimated current values. She knew you were sitting on millions before Brian did. Before you did. Marcus pulled up a timeline on his laptop, color-coded entries showing Vanessa's movements over 18 months. She cultivated Brian deliberately. Showed up at the same coffee shop he frequented. Randomly, attended the same networking events. Made it seem like fate. By the time they started the affair, she'd already done complete financial background checks on both of you. I stared at the folders, the pattern sickeningly clear. Why hasn't she been arrested? For victims, millions stolen, and she's just walking around free. Because she's careful. Everything looks consensual. Bad investments that victims agreed to. Estate planning that victims requested. Relationship drama that's messy but not illegal. By the time victims realize what happened, she's moved on to the next target. Evidence is scattered. Jurisdictions don't talk to each other. And men like Thomas and David were too embarrassed to push for prosecution. He pulled out the thickest folder, this one with my name on the tab. But the recordings I've collected over the past 3 months change everything. They document Vanessa planning crimes before committing them. Instructing Brian on how to commit identity theft. Discussing ways to accelerate your father's death through stress. Bragging about previous victims. It's all there in her own words. You recorded her for months? I had to. She destroyed my life, destroyed 3 other men that I know of, probably more I haven't found yet. When I saw her with Brian, saw the pattern starting again, I knew I had to act. I couldn't let her destroy another family. His voice cracked slightly for the first time. Sending that photo to your father was my Hail Mary. I didn't know if he'd respond, if he'd believe it, if he'd do anything about it. I definitely didn't know he'd move so fast, build such a comprehensive legal defense in 72 hours. But I'm glad he did. He saved you from something that would have destroyed you. Amanda Pierce arrived at Marcus's office around 11 a.m. with news that made the situation even more twisted. We subpoenaed Vanessa Chen's medical records this morning as part of the fraud investigation, she said, opening her laptop. Jessica, there's something you need to know. Something Brian definitely doesn't know. She turned the screen toward me. Medical records from a gynecologist's office. Vanessa claimed to Brian she was 8 weeks pregnant. That was the pressure point. The reason he needed to leave you immediately, serve the divorce papers, secure his share of your inheritance before the baby arrived. Brian mentioned it to his attorney mentioned it in a preliminary filing. That's how we knew to look. Amanda scrolled through the records. According to her gynecologist's files, Vanessa had a bilateral tubal ligation 4 years ago. That's voluntary permanent sterilization. She cannot get pregnant. She hasn't been pregnant. The whole thing was a lie. The room tilted slightly. She lied about being pregnant to manipulate Brian into moving faster? Exactly. Create urgency, make him feel responsible, force him to act before thinking clearly. Marcus found evidence she did the same thing to David Park. Claimed pregnancy, pushed for marriage, created a timeline that pressured him into decisions he wouldn't have made otherwise. By the time the truth came out, she'd already secured the property deeds. Marcus leaned forward. It's psychological manipulation. Pregnancy creates emotional bonds, makes men feel protective, overrides rational decision-making. She uses it like a weapon. Amanda continued scrolling. There's more. We ran a comprehensive background check. Vanessa's divorce from Marcus was finalized 2 years ago, but she remarried 8 months ago. A man named Stephen Walsh in Las Vegas. Real estate developer, recently widowed, owns multiple properties in Nevada. She's still legally married to him. She's married. The information kept getting worse. Does Stephen Walsh know about Brian? We contacted him this morning. He had no idea. Thought his wife was on business trips when she was actually in Oregon with your husband. He's filing for an annulment and cooperating with our investigation. Marcus pulled up more files. Which means Vanessa's relationship with Brian is bigamy on top of adultery. Any claims she might make about relationship damages or emotional harm are void. She was committing crimes the entire time. Where's Brian now? I asked. Still at the hotel downtown, Marcus said. Making dozens of phone calls, to attorneys, to Vanessa, to friends. He doesn't know about the pregnancy lie yet. Vanessa's been avoiding his calls since Monday afternoon when she realized there's no money to access. She's cutting him loose. Of course she is. He's useless to her now. Amanda closed her laptop. We're building criminal cases against both of them, but Vanessa's the primary target. She's the architect, the planner, the one with the pattern of behavior. Brian's the tool she used. That doesn't excuse what he did, but legally the conspiracy charges will stick much harder to her. I thought about Brian, manipulated into manipulating me, both villain and victim of the same woman. What happens to him? That depends on his cooperation, Amanda said. If he provides testimony against Vanessa, details about her planning and instructions, we might recommend reduced charges. Maybe probation instead of prison time. If he refuses to cooperate, he faces the full weight of identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy charges alone. Could be 5 to 7 years. He won't cooperate, I said quietly. He's too proud to admit he was played. He'll convince himself it was all his idea, that he was in control the whole time. Then he'll go to prison, Marcus said simply. That afternoon Maria called. Jessica, we're organizing a meeting tonight at the Morrison Street Community Room. All of your father's tenants. We want to talk to you about something important. I arrived at 6 p.m. to find the room full. 23 people, ranging from elderly Curtis to the young Johnson family with their toddler Emma. They'd brought food, casseroles, cookies, fruit, and arranged chairs in a circle like a support group. Maria stood up as I entered. We know you're going through something terrible. We know about the divorce, about the man your father tried to warn you about. We wanted you to know, we're here for you. Whatever you need, however we can help. Curtis stood next, his voice gruff but warm. Your daddy took care of us for decades. Never raised rent unfairly. Fixed things himself to keep costs down. Treated us like family, not tenants. Now it's our turn. We take care of Jason's daughter. That's how family works. The Johnsons spoke next. We've been documenting everything at the 4th Street property. The vape shop Brian allowed, the lease violations, the problems he caused. We've got photos, dates, witness statements from neighboring businesses. Whatever you need for the legal case, we've got it. One by one, tenants shared stories I'd never heard. Dad helping families through job losses. Waiving rent during medical emergencies. Showing up with groceries when someone was struggling. Fixing cars, babysitting grandkids, attending graduations and weddings. He never told me any of this, I whispered. Maria smiled, tears in her eyes. Your daddy wasn't the bragging type. He just did what needed doing. But now you understand what you inherited. Not just buildings, Jessica. Community. People who love this family. People who want to help you the way Jason helped us. I cried in that community room, surrounded by strangers who felt more like family than my own husband had. These were the people Dad had built relationships with. The lives he'd touched. The legacy that mattered more than any property value. I'll take care of you, I promised. The way Dad did. Nothing changes. The buildings stay affordable, the repairs get done, the community stays together. They applauded. Curtis handed me a cardboard box filled with cards, letters, photos spanning decades. For when you doubt yourself, he said. For when you forget who your daddy was and who raised you. Remember this. Remember us. Wednesday evening, I was back at the hotel when someone knocked on my door at 9 p.m. I looked through the peephole. Brian looking terrible. Unshaven, red eyes, wrinkled clothes like he'd slept in them. I opened the door with the chains still on. What do you want, Brian? Please. Just 5 minutes. I need to talk to you. Against my better judgment, I let him in. He sat on the edge of the bed, head in his hands, the picture of defeat. I messed up. I know I messed up. Vanessa played me. The pregnancy was fake. Did you know that? I know. She's not answering my calls. Her attorney sent me a cease and desist letter. She's claiming I harassed her, that the fraud was all my idea, that she's a victim. She's throwing me completely under the bus. I sat in the chair by the window, keeping distance between us. What did you expect? I don't know. I thought. He looked up, and for a brief moment I saw the man I'd married 7 years ago. Young, hopeful, full of dreams that never materialized. I thought your dad's money would fix everything. My failures, our problems, all of it. I thought if I could just access those properties, I could turn my life around, prove I wasn't worthless. So you committed fraud. Served me divorce papers at my father's funeral. Conspired with your mistress to steal my inheritance. When you say it like that. That's what you did, Brian. He started pacing. I know I can't fix this. I know you hate me. But Jess, they're going to arrest me. The prosecutor called my attorney. Identity theft, fraud, conspiracy. I could go to prison for years. You should have thought about that before opening credit cards in my name. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. If I could take it back. But you can't. Sorry doesn't fix anything. He moved toward me, desperate. What if I testify against Vanessa? Give them everything she said, everything she planned? Will that help? Will you ask them to go easier on me? I looked at this man I'd shared 7 years with and felt nothing but tired. I'm not asking anyone to do anything for you, Brian. You made your choices. Now face the consequences. So that's it? You're just going to let me go to prison? I'm going to let the justice system do its job. He left without another word. I locked the door, feeling nothing. No satisfaction, no sadness. Just relief that it was finally over. Marcus called minutes later. Brian just left. Did he threaten you? No. He begged. It was pathetic. Good. Hotel security recorded the conversation. Hallway camera caught audio. He admitted to the fraud, admitted Vanessa manipulated him. Amanda will use that. I hung up and opened my laptop. Started researching property management courses, tenant rights laws, everything I'd need to know to run Dad's empire properly. The revenge was working. But that wasn't enough anymore. I had a legacy to build. Thursday morning, I was at a coffee shop near the hotel researching nonprofit incorporation procedures when Amanda called. We're moving forward. Arrest warrants signed this morning for both Brian Morrison and Vanessa Chin. Brian will be picked up this afternoon at his hotel. Vanessa's proving more difficult. She left town Tuesday night, but we've got alerts at airports and border crossings. We'll find her. My coffee went cold in my hands. This was really happening. When will I know? You'll know. Trust me, you'll know. By 3 p.m. my phone started buzzing nonstop. Text messages from people I barely knew. Missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. I finally answered one. Sharon from the hospital billing department. Jessica. Oh my God, are you okay? It's all over the news. Your husband was arrested. They're saying fraud, identity theft, conspiracy. Is it true? I turned on the television in my hotel room. Local news, breaking story banner across the bottom of the screen. Brian Morrison, 34, was taken into custody this afternoon at a downtown hotel on multiple charges including identity theft, credit card fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Morrison is accused of opening fraudulent accounts in his wife's name and conspiring with real estate agent Vanessa Chin to defraud his late father-in-law's estate. They showed footage of Brian being let out of the hotel in handcuffs, head down, refusing to look at cameras. He looked smaller somehow. Defeated in a way I'd never seen. The news anchor continued. This arrest is part of a larger investigation into Chin, who authorities say has targeted multiple victims over several years in elaborate financial schemes. Chin is currently wanted on multiple warrants and is believed to have fled the jurisdiction. My phone rang. Eleanor. Have you seen the news? I'm watching it now. Marcus's evidence opened everything up. Thomas Bradley's family heard about the arrest, came forward with their story. They're pushing for charges related to his death. Elder abuse, fraud, whatever will stick. David Park filed a civil suit this morning seeking to recover the $1.2 million Vanessa took in his divorce. The whole pattern is unraveling. I sat on the hotel bed watching my husband's arrest play on loop on 3 different news channels. Brian's attorney called me an hour ago, Eleanor continued. He's already negotiating a plea deal. Wants to offer full testimony against Vanessa in exchange for reduced charges. He's scared Jessica. Looking at serious prison time, and his attorney knows cooperation is his only path to a lighter sentence. Will he take it? Probably. Pride only goes so far when you're facing 7 years in prison. My guess is he'll serve 2 years, maybe 18 months with good behavior. Vanessa's another story. Have they found her? Not yet. But they will. She made a mistake leaving. It adds flight risk to the charges, makes bail nearly impossible. When they catch her, she's looking at 10 to 15 years minimum. The news switched to another story. I turned off the television. Eleanor, is it really over? The criminal proceedings are just beginning. But for you? Yes. The divorce will be finalized uncontested within 30 days. Brian has no claims to anything. Your father's estate is completely secure. You're free, Jessica. Free. The word should have felt triumphant. Instead it felt strange, almost hollow. I'd been operating in crisis mode for 2 weeks. Funeral, betrayal, legal warfare. Now what? What do I do now? Eleanor's voice softened. You live. You build. You become the woman your father knew you could be. Friday afternoon I finally dealt with Dad's truck. I'd been avoiding it, this last physical piece of him sitting in that parking lot behind Maria's duplex. But I couldn't leave it there forever. I drove to 7th Avenue, parked next to the old Ford pickup. The keys were still in the ignition where Dad had left them Thursday morning before his heart attack. Like he'd just run inside for a minute and would be right back. I climbed into the driver's seat. The smell hit me immediately. Motor oil, old coffee, the mint gum Dad always chewed to quit smoking decades ago. His electrician's toolbox sat in the truck bed, every tool organized exactly how he liked it. His thermos was in the cup holder, still containing coffee that had gone cold and moldy. I opened the glove compartment looking for the registration, needing to transfer the title. Insurance papers, a flashlight, his union card, and another envelope. My name written on it in Mom's handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. The paper was yellowed, the edges soft with age. Mom's handwriting, distinctive and careful. Jessica, if you're reading this, I'm gone and you found the truck. Good. I wanted you to have one more thing from me, something I couldn't put in the official letter your father will give you. Your mother and I started buying properties right after she was diagnosed. She had 6 months, the doctor said. She made it 18 fighting every day. During those months she made me promise things. She said, Jason, we need to protect our baby girl. Build something that lasts. Build something nobody can take away from her. Every property I bought, I thought of your mother. Every repair I made myself, every tenant I helped, I was keeping my promise to her. She never got to see what we built, but she started it. The Morrison Street building? That was her idea. She saw the neighborhood changing, saw families who needed affordable housing, saw potential everyone else missed. The duplex on 7th Avenue where Maria lives? Your mother picked it out 3 days before she died. She was so weak she could barely walk, but she insisted we drive by it. She said, that will help someone, Jason. Buy it. She never got to see it renovated, but she knew it would matter. You inherited more than money, kiddo. You inherited your mother's vision and my stubbornness. Use them both. Build something that matters. Help people the way we tried to help you. And remember, we're always with you. Every building, every brick, every tenant who says thank you. That's us watching over you. I love you, Jessica. Mom loves you. Make us proud. Dad. I sat in that truck in a parking lot on a Friday afternoon and cried. For Dad. For Mom. For the family that had protected me even from the grave. For the legacy I'd almost lost and the responsibility I'd just inherited. 3 months passed. The initial chaos settled into routine. The divorce was finalized in October. Uncontested, quick, final. Brian pleaded guilty to identity theft and fraud charges, was sentenced to 2 years in minimum security prison. Vanessa was found in Arizona trying to board a flight to Mexico, was extradited back, and was currently awaiting trial with bail denied. The news cycle moved on. People stopped asking me about it. Life returned to something resembling normal, except nothing was normal anymore. I sat in Eleanor's conference room on a cold November morning with a purpose that had nothing to do with revenge or legal battles. I want to create a foundation, I told Eleanor. In my parents' names. The Jason and Sarah Hart Foundation for Financial Empowerment. I'd spent 3 months researching nonprofit structures, talking to financial advisors, consulting with people who ran similar organizations. I had a complete proposal printed and bound. The foundation will focus on helping women escape financial abuse. Free financial literacy classes. Emergency grants for women leaving dangerous situations. Mentorship programs pairing survivors with professionals who can teach them skills. Legal aid partnerships. Eleanor read through my proposal carefully. This is comprehensive. You've really thought this through. I've had time. The rental income is $18,000 monthly. Half keeps the properties maintained and reinvested. Dad's buildings need to stay strong for the tenants. The other half funds the foundation. That's $9,000 monthly for programming, grants, education. It's not millions, but it's sustainable. Marcus, who'd become an unlikely friend through all of this, leaned forward. You could scale this. Partner with domestic violence shelters, legal aid organizations, community colleges. The model is replicable. That's phase 2. Right now I want to start small, do it right. I'm enrolling in classes part-time starting January. Property management certification and social work basics. I want to understand both sides of this. The business side and the human side. Eleanor set down the proposal. Your father would be so proud of you. I hope so. I'm trying to honor what he built. What he and Mom built together. Maria had volunteered to help organize the mentorship program. Curtis offered to teach basic home repair and maintenance skills. Practical knowledge that helped people save money and feel capable. The Johnsons were coordinating childcare during workshops so mothers could attend without worrying about their kids. The community Dad had built was expanding, becoming something bigger than any of us alone. We launch in March, I decided. 6 months from now. That gives me time to get the nonprofit status approved, recruit board members, set up proper infrastructure. We'll hold the first workshop in the Morrison Street Community Room. It feels right starting there. December brought Vanessa's trial. Amanda called asking if I wanted to give a victim impact statement. I didn't hesitate. Yes. I want her to hear this from me. The courthouse was smaller than I'd imagined. Plain. Bureaucratic. Fluorescent lights and worn carpet. Vanessa sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, her blonde hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, no makeup, looking ordinary in a way that felt almost offensive given the damage she'd caused. When the judge called my name, I walked to the podium. Looked directly at Vanessa. I don't hate you, I began. I probably should, but I don't. You tried to destroy my life. Manipulated my husband. Researched my family like we were marks instead of people. Planned and schemed and lied for 18 months. But here's what you didn't understand. You can't steal what matters most. Vanessa's eyes met mine. Still cold. Still calculating. Even now looking for angles. My father built an empire, yes. But it wasn't the buildings or the money or the rental income. It was the relationships. The tenants who loved him. The community that rallied around me when everything fell apart. The values he taught me. You can't steal that. You can't manipulate that. You can't forge documents to take that away. I pulled out a photo I'd brought. Dad in his work clothes, smiling, standing in front of the Morrison Street building. Held it up so the judge could see. This is Jason Hart. Electrician. Landlord. Father. The man you tried to profit from by destroying his daughter. You failed. Because men like my father build things that last longer than your schemes, stronger than your lies, deeper than your greed. I looked at the judge now instead of Vanessa. Vanessa Chin is very good at what she does. She's ruined lives, destroyed families, stolen futures. She'll do it again if given the chance. I'm not asking for revenge. I'm asking for protection. Protect the next woman she'd target. The next family she'd research. The next victim she'd manipulate. Maximum sentence. Please. I sat down. Vanessa's attorney stood, argued for leniency. Claimed his client had been abused herself, was a victim of her own circumstances, deserved compassion. The judge listened impassively, then delivered the sentence. Ms. Chen, you've demonstrated a clear pattern of predatory behavior spanning multiple years and multiple victims. You've shown no remorse, no acceptance of responsibility, no indication you would behave differently if released. You are a danger to vulnerable people. I'm sentencing you to 12 years in state prison with mandatory restitution to all identified victims and a lifetime ban from any real estate licensing or financial services work. Vanessa's face crumpled. For the first time she looked genuinely afraid. Bailiffs led her away in handcuffs. I felt nothing but relief. Not triumph. Not satisfaction. Just the quiet relief of a door finally closing. Outside the courthouse, Marcus waited on the steps. How do you feel? Like I can breathe properly for the first time in months. It's finally over. I shook my head. Dad won this. He set everything in motion. I just showed up and signed papers where he told me to. Marcus smiled. You did a lot more than that. You honored his legacy. You're building something he'd be proud of. That's not just winning. That's transformation. We walked to the parking lot together. The December air was cold, clean, promising snow. I had a property management class to get to, then a meeting with the nonprofit lawyer about the foundation paperwork. Dad's truck was gone. I donated it to a vocational program that taught young people auto mechanics. But his legacy was everywhere. In the buildings he'd bought. The tenants he'd helped. The daughter he'd protected even in death. I was just getting started. 6 months after Vanessa's sentencing, I stood at the front of the Morrison Street community room watching 40 women file in for the first workshop of the Jason and Sarah Hart Foundation. They came in slowly, hesitantly. Some brought children who immediately gravitated toward the play area the Johnsons had set up. Some brought friends for moral support. A few came alone, sitting in the back, arms crossed defensively like they expected judgment. I recognized that posture. I'd worn it myself not that long ago. Maria stood beside me, greeting people as they entered. Curtis was setting up the refreshment table, coffee, tea, store-bought cookies because nobody had time to bake. Simple. Practical. Exactly what Dad would have done. At exactly 10 a.m. I stepped to the front of the room. My hands shook slightly holding my notes. Good morning. My name is Jessica Morrison, and 6 months ago I discovered my husband had been committing identity theft and fraud for years. I also discovered my father had spent decades building something I never knew existed, specifically to protect me from exactly what was happening. The room went quiet. Women leaned forward. I'm not sharing this for sympathy. I'm sharing it because every woman in this room has a story too. Stories of being controlled through money. Stories of not knowing what bills exist or what accounts are open in your name. Stories of being trapped because leaving means losing everything. A woman in the third row nodded, tears already forming. This foundation exists because my father believed in building things that last. He believed in protecting family. He believed that knowledge is power and community is survival. Today we start learning together. The workshop covered basics I wish someone had taught me years ago. How to check credit reports. How to recognize financial red flags in relationships. How to understand asset protection and build savings even on minimum wage. How to document financial abuse. How to leave safely. Maria co-taught, sharing her own story of divorce 19 years ago. How Dad had given her housing when she had nothing. How she'd rebuilt slowly, carefully, one paycheck at a time. Curtis taught a session on basic home maintenance. How to fix a leaky faucet, change air filters, handle minor repairs. Skills that saved money and built confidence. The Johnson family managed childcare in the next room, giving mothers space to focus without worrying about their kids. During the lunch break, a young woman approached me. Early 20s, worn clothes, bruises on her wrist she kept trying to hide. I'm Ashley, she whispered. I'm in exactly where you were. My boyfriend handles everything. I don't even know what bills we have. I found out last month he opened credit cards in my name. I'm scared to leave because I don't know how I'd survive. I sat with her at a corner table away from the crowd. You can survive. I'll help you survive. We'll help you survive. I gave her Maria's number for mentorship. Connected her with our emergency grant program. Small amounts, $500 to $2,000, enough to get first month's rent and a security deposit somewhere safe. Explained the housing program we'd started in Dad's vacant units. You don't have to figure this out alone, I told her. That's the whole point. None of us do this alone. By the end of the day, 37 women had enrolled in our ongoing program. 3 had requested emergency grants. 2 were moving into the foundation housing units next week. 5 had exchanged phone numbers, forming their own support network. Curtis pulled me aside as we cleaned up. Your daddy's watching this. Smiling so big right now. I hoped he was right. In March, I'd left the house on Maple Street. Couldn't stay there anymore, surrounded by memories of a marriage that had never been real. Instead, I moved into a vacant apartment in the mixed-use building downtown. Dad's building, now my building. Second floor. One bedroom. Nothing fancy. But it was mine. Truly, completely mine. I furnished it slowly from thrift stores and tenant donations. Maria gave me her old kitchen table when she upgraded. Curtis built me bookshelves from reclaimed wood. The Johnsons helped me paint the walls a soft blue I'd always wanted but Brian had said was too bold. I hung photos everywhere. Mom and Dad on their wedding day. Dad in his work truck. Mom holding baby me in the hospital. The family I came from. The legacy I was continuing. Some evenings I sat on the small balcony with coffee, watching the street below come alive. The coffee shop on the corner was owned by Linda, who'd been Dad's tenant for 12 years before he helped her buy the business. The bookstore next door belonged to an elderly couple who'd rented from Dad for 2 decades and still sent me Christmas cards. The community center across the street hosted basketball games until dark, kids laughing and arguing over fouls. This was what Dad had built. Not just buildings. Life. Community. Hope. I started attending Property Management Association meetings. Met with tenants monthly to hear concerns and feedback. Learned to read complex lease agreements and navigate city housing codes. Took online courses in property maintenance and tenant relations. Miguel, who'd managed Dad's properties for 15 years, became my mentor. Your father had a philosophy, he explained one afternoon while we toured a unit that needed renovation. He said, treat people like family and mostly they'll act like family. He trusted tenants. Gave second chances. Fixed things fast. Kept rent reasonable. Business people said he was leaving money on the table. He didn't care. Said he wasn't in it for maximum profit. What was he in it for? Miguel smiled. Maximum impact. He measured success by how many families stayed stable, how many kids graduated high school, how many people had safe homes. That was his return on investment. I kept that philosophy. Some real estate advisors I consulted said I could raise rents by 30% and still be below market rate. I didn't. Dad's tenants had been paying the same reasonable rates for years. That wasn't changing. By summer, I'd renovated 2 vacant units specifically for foundation participants leaving abuse. Furnished them with donated furniture. Included utilities. Gave women 6 months free to get back on their feet. Maria managed the program. 3 women had already moved in and were rebuilding their lives. In July, Eleanor forwarded me a letter from Central State Correctional Facility. Brian's handwriting on the envelope. I almost threw it away. Stood over the trash can in my apartment holding it, debating. Then I made coffee, sat on my balcony and opened it. Jessica, I don't expect you to respond. I don't expect forgiveness. My therapist here says I need to take accountability. He's right. I was a terrible husband. Selfish. Delusional. Cruel. I blamed everyone, your dad, you, the economy, bad luck. Never myself. I married you because I knew your dad had money. That's the truth. I thought I loved you but really I loved what you represented. Security. Potential inheritance. An easy path to success I hadn't earned. When Vanessa showed me how much your dad really had, I stopped seeing you as a person. You became an obstacle between me and money I felt entitled to. I'm sorry. You deserved a real partner. Someone who supported you, appreciated you, protected you. I was none of those things. Your father saw through me from day one. I resented him for it instead of trying to prove him wrong. Prison gives you time to think. To see clearly. You were the best thing in my life and I destroyed it chasing money that was never mine to claim. I heard about your foundation. About how you're helping women escape situations like the one Vanessa and I created for you. I'm proud of you. I know I have no right to be, but I am. You're everything I pretended to be, strong, purposeful, building something real. I have 18 months left. When I get out, I'm leaving town. Starting over somewhere nobody knows me. I owe you that. A clean break. I'm sorry. I wish I could take it back. I can't. But I can make sure you never have to see me again. Be happy, Jess. You earned it. Brian. I read it twice. Then I filed it in a folder with all the other documents from that nightmare time. Not forgiveness. But closure. He'd finally told the truth. That was something. The first anniversary of Dad's death fell on a Thursday, exactly like the day he died. I woke at dawn, drove to the cemetery where Mom and Dad were buried side by side. Simple headstones exactly as Dad had prearranged. No fuss. No drama. Just their names, dates, and the words, "Together always," on Mom's stone. I sat on the grass between them, morning sun warming my face. "Hey Dad." "Hey Mom. It's been a year." I updated them on everything. The foundation serving 60 women now. The properties thriving, every tenant current on rent. The community growing stronger. My classes. Halfway through property management certification, planning to start social work courses in the spring. I think I'm okay now. Took a while. I was angry for months. Angry at Brian for betraying me. Angry at Vanessa for targeting us. Angry at you, Dad, for dying and leaving me to handle everything alone. But I'm not angry anymore. I'm grateful. I pulled out Dad's letters, both of them worn soft from rereading. He knew. Somehow you knew you were dying. Knew what Brian was planning. Knew exactly what I'd need. You gave me money, yes. But more than that, you gave me purpose. A reason to build something that matters. A robin landed on Mom's headstone, red chest bright against gray granite. Mom, I wish I remembered you better. I was so young when you died. But Dad kept you alive in everything he did. Every property choice, every tenant relationship, every careful financial decision. That was you working through him. And now it's both of you working through me. I stayed an hour talking to stones and birds, feeling their presence in a way I couldn't explain. Then I drove to Pete's Breakfast Corner. Sat in the same booth where Dad had told me to meet Eleanor a year ago. Ordered the lumberjack special he always got. The waitress remembered. "Your father was the best customer we ever had. Always knew everyone's names. Best tipper too." I left a $50 tip on a $12 meal. What Dad would have done. That evening, the foundation held our one-year celebration. 60 people packed the Morrison Street community room. Current participants, graduates of the program, volunteers, donors, tenants, community members. Maria spoke about lives transformed. Curtis talked about Dad's legacy living on through service. The Johnsons shared how their family had found purpose helping others. Then Ashley stood up. The young woman from our first workshop. "A year ago I was trapped. Broke. Feared. Convinced I couldn't survive alone." Her voice shook but held strong. "Jessica and this foundation gave me a path out. Emergency grant for apartment deposit. Maria mentoring me through budgeting. Curtis teaching me to change my own oil so I wasn't dependent on my ex for car maintenance." She paused, wiping tears. "I finished medical billing certification. Got hired at Memorial Hospital, actually working in Jessica's old department. I'm supporting myself now. I'm free. This foundation didn't just help me. It saved my life. And the man who built all this never even met me. That's legacy." I stood to close the evening, looking at faces of women who'd survived, children playing safely, a community built on mutual support. My father used to say, "Build things that last." He meant buildings, yes. But he also meant this: relationships, support systems, hope. We've built something here that will outlast all of us. Something that grows stronger every year. I raised my cup of punch. To Jason and Sarah Hart. To second chances. To women who refuse to stay broken. To being stronger together than alone. To Jason and Sarah Hart, everyone echoed. That night, I lay in my apartment listening to the city sounds below. Distant traffic, voices from the street, life happening all around me. Peace. That's what I felt. Not happiness exactly. Not the absence of grief. But peace. The acceptance that life gives you tragedies and gifts simultaneously, and what matters is what you build from both. Dad gave me $5 million. But his real gift was showing me who I could become. Not someone who inherited wealth. Someone who used it for something larger than herself. I fell asleep thinking about tomorrow's property inspection. Next week's workshop. Next month's tenant appreciation dinner. The life I was building, brick by brick, relationship by relationship, exactly how Dad had taught me without words. The revenge I'd gotten wasn't destruction. It was reconstruction. Brian and Vanessa tried to bury me. They planted me instead. And I grew into someone my father would recognize, my mother would love, and I could finally respect. Dad's will didn't just protect money. Protected me. From predators who saw me as a target. From a marriage erasing who I was. from a life too small for who I was meant to become. His final gift wasn't buildings or rental income or legal documents. It was permission to become myself. And I was just getting started. If this story of a father's final protection had you gripped from start to finish, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Jessica signed those divorce papers at the funeral, knowing Brian had already lost everything. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more powerful stories of resilience and justice. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.